One thing I wanted to start with, because a story that we've been following over the last couple of months certainly has been the government's insider trading investigation into SAC Capital and the hedge fund star there, the founder, Steven Cohen. Do you see any parallels between that investigation and what's going on right now with Major League Baseball?
Well, sure, Scarlett. The two investigations, baseball and with SAC Capital, look very much alike because really what's going on with Major League Baseball is baseball's version of insider trading. That's what performance-enhancing drug use really is. It's something that happens off the field in a way that you may know it's going on, maybe not, but there's something happening, you find out about it, and there's a whole different story.
And I just want to say that Major League Baseball has agreed to 50-game suspensions with 12 players for their roles in the biogenesis cases, according to multiple media reports. A-Rod expected to be served with the harshest penalty. We're still waiting for that announcement once again. I wanted to bring you some sound that we got from Fay Vincent, the former MLB commissioner. He spoke to us on Bloomberg Surveillance earlier today. Listen up.
I don't know that the drug problem in baseball or in any other sport or in the Olympics or in cycling is ever going to be over. I think that's the beginning of wisdom. The problem is the chemists are coming up with things that will enhance performance. They're well ahead of the cops, and all of these sports are threatened because that form of cheating, that form of malignancy in sports ruins the sports.
Ruins the sports. Do teams deserve some of the blame here? And I'm bringing up the Yankees because to some extent, in the locker room and at the top, somewhere is turning a blind eye to all of this.
Well, that could be. I mean, that's part of this whole thing with investigating and what have you. But I think that one of the interesting things to look at is really that sort of trade-off between things in the short term, things in the long term. That's always there. So you have mega contracts, lots of money, lots of time, right? $275 million, 10 years. Things are bound to change within 10 years' time.
You don't see those kinds of contracts anymore.
Well, you think you don't, but they slip in. They're still a little bit the norm, and there isn't necessarily anything wrong with them from the labor side of it, but from a long-term perspective and knowing just the way that information moves now, very different than it was 5, even 3 years ago.
Can you compare and contrast what's going on with A-Rod now with what happened with Barry Bonds? It's playing out very differently here.
Right. So you actually have with Barry Bonds and Alex Rodriguez, two players who have the same sort of attitude. And in a way, when we look at these sorts of behaviors, you have to wonder, what's the end game here? What is that person trying to get? So you look at that versus a player who, you know what, I cheated, it was wrong, I'm done with it, versus somebody who is doing what Bonds did or what Alex Rodriguez is doing. And that's really, it usually boils down to one of three things. It's either pride, arrogance, or trying to gain some upper hand. So I'd have to wonder what the end game is and what Alex Rodriguez is trying to get out of the deal here.
Well, the end game right now for MLB is that ballpark attendance is falling. It's been falling all season long. Does a high-profile suspension, does making an example out of A-Rod, is that good for baseball?
It is. This is great for baseball. It's great for the Baseball Players Association. It's great for Bud Selig. It's great for Michael Weiner. It's great for everybody really involved, I would say, except for the players who got caught cheating, unless they want to do some sort of forgiveness. But really, at the end of the day, it is. It's great because it actually helps clean out the system in a way and make players accountable in a way that they weren't before.
But there's an issue with the balance of economics here, because as long as players have a chance of making it out of their situation, and here I'm referring to perhaps players in Latin America who are trying to make it into the big leagues, there's always going to be that incentive to pursue some way of getting an edge, like Steven Cohen did with hedge funds, because the risk reward is so huge, the payoff is so big.
It is, and you're exactly right about that risk reward and the payoff, and that's really what Fay Vincent was getting to in his remarks from earlier, is that there's always going to be somebody who's ahead of it because the incentives are so huge, and the trade-off is, I might get caught, but what are the consequences of it? Well, if you can get away with it, maybe you can burrow yourself in a hole for a little while and come out after a few years. That's a different story. As long as you get to go away with your money, maybe not such a bad trade-off.
Which pro sports league has done an admirable job with PED testing and dissuading people from doing anything like this.
Well, sure. Baseball is doing it. Hockey's worked on it quite well. The NFL is actually brilliant at it because when a player gets suspended, it doesn't make news anymore. So they've actually really figured out the model. They figured out the system, and they've built it in over time to where you look at it, people just don't pay attention to suspension.
It's just not a headline the way it is here in baseball.
It's just not a headline.
And talk to me about sports being still proving to be a safe investment, a safe harbor for investors. Why is that when there's the risk of cheating and the risk of an A-Rod blowing up in our faces?
Right. Sports is reliable on all sorts of different levels. And at the end of the day, first of all, you can look and see that there's huge, huge money going into media. There aren't a lot of safe havens or safe harbors in other markets. And one of the things is that sports tends to be around. We may like baseball a little bit more. We might like football a little bit more. Maybe soccer will come online as things change. But the truth is, people go out to sports events. They engage in sports. They participate in sports on a number of different levels. And sports ends up just being simply reliable. It changes, but it's reliable.